Good evening and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland, Scotland at 7. And tonight I am joined by a wonderful guest, Siobhan Tolland. Hi Siobhan, how are you doing this evening?
Not too bad, not too bad.
And we'll carry on with the coronavirus update this evening. As of 2 p.m. today, a total of 1,540,563 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,367,561 were confirmed as negative. 174,002 were positive. There are 1,049 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. This will be an underestimate of the number of cases, and not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There were 87 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 5,796. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. Of the people who have tested positive, 2,010 were in hospital last night, 149 of whom were in intensive care. 437,900 people have now received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 6,060 have now received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures published today show 100,162 patients who have tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness. And that's an increase of 1,631 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just hospitals, and our thoughts are with all the families and friends of those people. Now, for the ONS update, the UK passed a total of 100,000 deaths due to COVID-19 on January the 7th, according to new figures from the Office of National Statistics, which also released data showing that deaths in care homes in England and Wales have risen to their highest level since last May. The date is earlier than previously estimated, due to figures being revised upwards since last week. The total death toll from the UK statistical agencies, which include deaths that occurred up to the 15th of January, is now at 107,907. Figures from the ONS also show that 1,719 care home residents died from the virus in the week to the 15th of January, more than doubling the death toll since Christmas. Now, if you would like to join in the conversation here, you can do so on Twitter by following us at Broadcast Scot using the hashtag at #Scotland@7, and we will put your tweets, as you can see, up on the screen, and please join in. Now, for our first story of the evening, the Tory party illegally collected data on the ethnicity of time. Sorry, need to get my teeth in for this evening, so bear with me. The Conservative Party acted illegally when it collected data on the ethnic backgrounds of 10 million voters before the 2019 general election. The Information Commissioner has told a committee of MPs. However, Elizabeth Denham insisted that there had been no need to issue an enforcement notice against the party, as it had voluntarily deleted the data it held after recommendation from her office. Answering questions at a Digital Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee meeting this morning, Denham said that the Conservatives collected estimated data on voters' ethnic origin, religion and country of birth had no legal basis. We made the recommendation they destroy the data because they didn't have a legal basis to collect it, she said, adding under sustained questioning from SNP MP John Nicholson, it was illegal to collect the ethnicity data. Once again, the teeth need to get put in. The breach was first highlighted in November in a report by the Information Commissioner's Office, or the ICO, assessing political parties' compliance with the data protection laws. It reported that the Conservatives had purchased so-called estimated data which attempts to identify individuals' ethnic origin, religion, country of birth, and other characteristics based on their first and last names, and appended it to the reports of 10 million people. Now, Siobhan, does this come as a surprise for you? Now, they've purchased this data, and which has not been legal. And as MP John Nicholson had said, that the ICO is being weak because they're not enforcing any notices on any political party who has been identified a breaching, but certainly in terms of the Conservatives, I mean, this is people's data. What do you make of this?
There's a couple of issues I think here that we maybe need to to provide a bit of background to this. I think if we look at the Brexit campaign in 2016 and the connection with organisations like Cambridge Analytica, and that process of digging into data on social media and following people on social media and trying to basically get as much data as you can in order to guide people's voter intentions, and the illegality of that. Well, there's a real kind of creepy surveillance to that, isn't there? And then I think that we all recognised that when it all kind of leaked out and the Guardian leaked it out a few years later. There's a kind of creepy surveillance as part of that, and it won the Brexit campaign as well. You know, the kind of Dominic Cummings style of campaign was born from that basis. I think the second element here, though, is not just the illegality, but the culture of racism that the Conservative Party have fostered and fostered quite significantly since Brexit, especially so. So this comes against a background of fear from the ethnic populations of what the government will do against them. I mean, you're talking about people being forcibly deported back. We're talking about the culture of fear within the Home Office. We're talking about a quite a sustained racist element within the government now. And then we suddenly find out that there's been an illegal purchase of data on people's ethnicity.
Yeah.
And I think that there is an element there where they can say that their intentions were, you know, they can say whatever they like of their intentions, but if we look at that from a kind of cultural and social and political perspective, then to me, it breeds so much more fear amongst the population of what the government was trying to do with that data. That concerns me a lot, actually, and it's quite unclear as to what their intentions were there, what they were needing there, and I think that needs to be investigated. As for the kind of accusation that it's not been policed effectively, well, yeah, because this is not good. This feels like a very slippy road into dangerous attacks and a dangerous surveillance of people to me.
Yeah,
and I'm not
completely agree with you there, Siobhan. Also, as well, it's quite sinister, isn't it? Because we do see on social media where we believe, you know, there's certain amounts of surveillance and things like that. And it is quite sinister, isn't it?
We're coming at the back of things like Black Lives Matter and you know and the kind of Brexit and kind of the Brexit party and Nigel Farage with kind of, you know, posters talking about, you know, they're coming to take our jobs and all this kind of fear of culture, and then suddenly there's this kind of, we're trying to get your data, we're trying to kind of access who you are and where you've come from. It feels really, really significantly kind of
hostile.
Yeah. Hostile is the word I've been looking for. Thank you, Sam. Hostile is the word. Hostile environment is what we've been calling this, the Home Office, isn't it? The hostile environment. That's exactly that. Yes, it's against that background, and I think that it it only exemplifies, I think, where the UK government are moving towards now, and it's not a nice place.
It's certainly not. My concern, I don't know about you, but if they're
Mm,
doing that with a certain group within um, our communities, they'll be doing
yeah,
it with other communities as well.
yeah, yeah.
And that's
I
quite
think that
concerning.
there's a real kind of dehumanisation process with the
Yeah.
UK government, and it's been increasingly over the last couple of decades, and it's become ever more apparent. Brexit's just allowed it to spill out. I mean, there is an element where we are subjects of the state. We are just there to please the economy and there to work for the economy. We no longer matter as individual human beings. There's a kind of element where we've lost our humanity. So there's if they can do that, they got caught. This is the point, isn't it? They didn't put their hands up
Yes.
and say, you know what, we've been a little bit naughty here and we've done something bad, so we're going to own up here. They got caught, and this is what they've been caught on. It's just another element, I think.
And also, as
It is,
well, to be turning around and basing it on people's names,
yeah.
there's something fundamentally sinister about that as well. I'm using that word sinister again, but it's just, the names,
Mm.
try and process where people have came from. And
Yeah, there's a
it's
racial
just,
profile in there, isn't
yeah,
there?
there is.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that takes us down a kind of a very,
Rocky
very
Road.
dangerous
Yeah.
path. I would be curious to see what some of the kind of ethnic minority organisations are going to be saying about this. I mean, I think it's disgraceful, and do you know what? See, about 10 years ago,
Hmm.
this would have been a resignable offence, but
Yeah,
it'll
definitely.
probably just go over. And I think it shows you how far we've come. This is outrageous, really. When you think about it, this is outrageous. And it's like, whatever, because and that's what's going to happen. And I think it shows you how declined we've become in terms of our race relations and how we treat people as a UK state.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you there, Siobhan. But we'll move on to tonight's next story, Scotland's vision for trade. The blueprint for how Scotland will do business around the globe was published by Trade Minister Ivan McKee. Scotland's vision for trade sets out 5 principles which will guide all future decisions on international trade, inclusive growth, well-being, sustainability, net zero and good governance. These principles will be used to address key trade challenges facing the economy, people, and the planet. The Scottish Government will partner with businesses which share these principles and work to improve their trading environment, promoting fair work and a just transition to net zero. To support this, the Scottish Government is also calling on the UK Government to protect the NHS, which the UK Government must make a red line in any trade negotiation, make compliance with fundamental human rights and the Paris Climate Agreement absolute limits for the initiation of the FTA negotiations, prioritise building on the trade cooperation agreement with the EU to uphold high standards, for the example through mutual recognition agreement for key goods sector. Now, Siobhan, the Scottish Government is calling on the UK Government to protect the NHS and the fundamental human rights and Paris Climate Agreement. First of all, we'll cover them. Um, do you think the UK Government is going to support the Scottish Government in this?
I think we can be pretty safe in saying no. That would be a big fat no. I think there'll be some lip service to it in terms of, there's been a lot of talk from the UK government of late in terms of kind of zero,
Yeah.
climate agreement and so forth, zero carbon economy and all that kind of stuff. But they've been saying that for a lot of years, and the problem with the Conservative government is that really nobody trusts them. So, they can say one thing and we know that that's probably not going to be true. So we kind of pretty much trust them as far as we can throw them. I think that what we've seen, and this is where the Scotland independence kind of process has become much more kind of deep and meaningful now for Scotland, is because we've the UK has moved economically over the last couple of decades into a very, very neoliberal, I suppose, economic structure where there is no sense of safety net, there's no welfare structure. It really is a kind of ruthless capitalism that Scotland has resisted, I think, over the last few decades, haven't they? And I think that Brexit's almost a combination of that, because what you've got in a post-Brexit UK, of course, is that, all those social contracts that we had in terms of our economy and how we want our society to run are just going to be ripped apart now. There's going to be no, I would say, the moral foundation, I suppose, or the ethical foundation of economics and trade is probably going to be much, much looser now. We saw that when the UK were kind of dying to do a trade deal with. Do you know what? I've lost his name already. Donald Trump. He's so yesterday's news that I forgot his name already. We saw that there was basically anything was up for grabs. The economy comes first, and the shareholders come first. People come last, and I think that's what we've got now.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is, that's the one thing about Scotland. We're very much aware of our personal well-being. And when it
Yeah,
comes to trade and it comes to our economy, that is very much of the importance. Do you
absolutely.
see the Scottish Government being able to put that pressure on the UK government to take more of that on board? Or do you think it's just going to be one of those ones that's a lost cause and we're just going to have to carry on our own route?
I think we've passed that point now. I
Yeah,
think we've passed the point of having any genuine genuine hope of influencing the
yeah.
UK. What I think is interesting about those principles is that I don't know if you've read the Citizens Assembly report. I'll have to say I haven't read it all. I've read the kind of shortened version, but it highlights the principles of the Citizens Assembly in terms of fair work, in terms of a kind of good welfare structure, in terms of a kind of a sustainable economy, those kind of things. And what that does, of course, is it taps into what the people of Scotland now want. What's particularly interesting about what I did watch a little bit of what Ivan McKee was saying earlier, and I think what's interesting here is I was talking about the UK disintegrating its ethical base, but I think what's happening for Scotland is that we're beginning to build a very strong moral welfare-based model of economics. It's the 21st version of 21st century's version, I think, of the Keynesian economic model, where we get the welfare structure and the well-being of society to work in conjunction with the economy. Whereas up till now, it's been very much of an economy where we work for the economy, but now that is been redressed and it's been rebalanced, if that makes sense. I think Scotland's part of, and this is where we kind of it becomes exciting in terms of our independence, because we can become part of a new growing economic structure with countries like New Zealand, Iceland, those kind of countries that are beginning to look at the concept of well-being and a completely different understanding of how our economy can work. And I think that Ivan McKee's principles today, I think that's the foundations of that and the beginnings of that process. That's not possible within the UK.
Definitely
I
not.
think everybody knows that now.
Yeah. One thing I took it from this
Yeah.
was the oil and gas sector. Now, what they were saying
Mm,
was end all overseas trade, backing and promotion focused on the fossil fuel goods and services by COP26. Legitimate exceptions to the withdrawal of support by COP26 would be where it's clear that the work is essential for a fair and just energy transition, i.e. such as decommissioning. Now, that just
mm,
goes to show that we are thinking ahead, we're thinking of the future.
yeah.
And it's not just the well-being, the growth and the sustainability, it's our environment as well. And that shows that we are
Yeah.
actually taking a path where we are moving away from the Westminster narrative
Yeah.
on how you grow an economy.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, the UK economy has never been particularly good at planning. They've lunged from crisis to crisis. If you look at, any fuel transition, if you look at that, the transition from coal, well, look at what happened. There
Yeah.
was no planning for the communities that were subject to that, and Scotland's still feeling the effects of that, as well. And I think that's what's at risk now, I think, by
Yeah.
being part of the UK, is that it will be yet another coal mining community saga, where people are just thrown on the scrap heap for the transition of economy's sake. I think that if you look at the model in Norway and how they have planned, I mean, they've been planning a lot. They've been investing. They're investing their oil fund into renewable energy now because they recognise that planning is now required, not just for the economy, not just for a kind of a zero carbon economy or a kind of a better earth, which are obviously required, but for keeping people's jobs and for keeping the societies and for the sake of the people who are in that kind of industry. So there really is a kind of thought there and a plan. It's not perfect, of course it's not, but it's a step in the right direction, and it's stepping away, like you said, from that very brutal economic structure that the UK now has.
Yes, certainly. And it's the thing is as well, it's about moving forward. And on
Yeah.
that note, we will move on to the next story. Right, the Erasmus exchange programme. The Scottish and Welsh governments have issued a joint statement on the Erasmus exchange programme. The statement, agreed by Further and Higher Education Minister Richard Lochhead and the Welsh Minister for Education, Kirsty Williams, says the UK government's decision not to associate Erasmus with reduced opportunities for all learners and cut support for the most deprived communities. It confirms that the Scottish and Welsh governments will explore how both countries can continue to enjoy the benefits offered by Erasmus. Now, Siobhan, this has been hitting the media quite a lot, even the mainstream media, and as well as all us along social media. Now they're bringing in a new Turing scheme, which will support universities, but it's not going to support adult education or youth work sectors, and it will fail to support a lot of strategic partnerships. How do you think this is going to affect Scotland, considering Scotland and proportionally have more participants that have gone abroad than anywhere else in the UK? How do you think this is going to affect our education and our sectors right across the board in Scotland?
It is an extraordinarily narrow understanding of what education is to close the Erasmus programme off to young people. It really, really is. It's one of the biggest educations I think that young people can have is to experience other cultures, other societies, and go out there and do the world. I when I was younger, we went to Germany. I lived in Germany for a bit, and it was exploring other cultures, other places. The next generation, I think maybe from me, it was much further afield. So New Zealand and Australia, kids went there. There's that. I think there's a need, there is a cultural innate need, I think, for young people especially, and adults as well, to explore the world beyond their own garden, if that makes sense. The fact that the Erasmus programme is shutting that down is just so narrow-minded and so short-sighted. Scotland, what's the saying? Stop the bus. Scotland wants to. The world stop the
Yeah,
bus. Scotland wants to get
get
on.
off.
There
Yeah,
really is an element of that here, that it's closing Scotland off from the world.
it
Okay,
certainly is.
because basically what it is, it's not even just about a social connection of exploring other cultures. You're talking about students going across there, studying at other universities, exchanging that young, vibrant exchanging of ideas. There's a kind of an enlightenment feel to that element of it, where there's basically just that intellectual engagement with countries across the world. It's a massive, wonderful opportunity where students can experience that engagement from other institutions, other universities and other learning environments, that can only benefit the young people involved in that, but the country that sends those young people there as well, because we all benefit from that. We benefit from that insight, we benefit from that experience, and it connects us to the rest of the world. This is what Brexit's done, isn't it? It's trying to close us off from the rest of the world. It's the reason we're going to become independent, because that is what we want. We want to be part of that world. And if that means losing connection with England, then that's what we'll do. I think it's another nail in the coffin for the UK, because, again, young people are very, very supportive of independence and very supportive of Europe. And to disconnect that is disastrous. I can see where the Scottish and Welsh government are genuinely desperately trying to re-engage that connection, because it's a massive loss to us, I think, as a nation.
It certainly is. And right, now we're going to move on to the next story. The labour market statistics. The latest Office for National Statistics, ONS, labour market survey published this morning reveals a large increase in the UK unemployment rate at 5%. That's up 0.6% on the quarter. The UK redundancies at a record high of 14.2 per thousand. That's up 6 per thousand on the quarter. And the UK employment rate falling to 75.2%, with over 800,000 fewer people in employment in December than February 2020. Commenting on the latest official labour market statistics published by the ONS today, Minister for Business, Fair Work, Skills, Jamie Hepburn, said for September to November 2020, Scotland's employment rate estimate has increased over the quarter to 74.4%, and the unemployment rate estimate has decreased over the quarter to 4.4%. HMRC early estimates for December 2020 for Scotland, all published this morning, show that there were 2.3 million payrolled employees in Scotland, increasing by 9,000 compared with November, however 67,000 lower than a year ago. These figures still do not reflect the full impact of coronavirus, COVID-19, or outlook for employment, as the job retention scheme continues to play an important role in supporting employers and employees. Combined with the huge economic uncertainty caused by Brexit, this remains an extremely uncertain time for the economy and jobs. The Scottish Government continues to support employers, allocating over £3 billion to help businesses since the start of this pandemic. Obviously, Siobhan, the economy has taken a hit and it's affected the job figures and everything since we've had to deal with COVID-19 and then Brexit on top. What do you make of this, and how do you see this panning out for the future in terms of employment in Scotland?
I think that it puts us in a bind, I think. And again, it comes back to it's a sad state. I think it's a sad place for Scotland at this moment, because the need to make a choice on our future is becoming very, very close to us now. And a lot of people have been trying to delay the choices because they've been unsure, etc., etc. But unemployment is one of those issues. As we begin to recover from COVID, we need to start thinking about how we recover from the economy that's going to nosedive. And we know that we're not just talking about COVID, we're talking about a Brexiteer and COVID now. Scotland is faring better, but we can do better, but we can only do that with the levers. What that really requires is a completely different outlook and a completely different understanding of how we can build that economy. I keep saying that we're talking almost about a post-45 deal here, because what we're looking at is a completely radical overhaul of how we invest in our economy, and not subject it to kind of private enterprise and etc., etc. We need to start rebuilding, and that means things like building social welfare places like housing, better schools, better hospitals, all those kind of things that can kickstart the economy. We don't have the levers though. We can't borrow to invest, for instance. That's something that Scotland can't do. I think that it is one of those things that if we're again tied to the sinking ship of the UK, we'll be going down an economic path that doesn't really build well-being in that recovery. And by putting well-being there, what that does mean is basically building for the community, and that can kickstart. We know that the Labour Party did that in 1945. There really needs some radical change in order to stop this onslaught that's going to happen in a COVIDeering, a Brexiteering COVID society that we're about to move into. I'm afraid it's not looking good, but we can do what's needed in order to try and sustain that economy.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just, you know, it's difficult. Right, we'll move on to the next story. EU citizens being offered financial incentives to leave the UK. The EU citizens are being offered financial incentives to leave the UK months before the deadline to apply for settled status, according to a report in The Guardian. From the 1st of January, EU citizens have quietly been added to the government's voluntary return scheme, where financial support is offered as an encouragement to return to their country of origin. Payments can include flights and up to £2,000 resettlement money. The scheme is designed to help some migrants in the UK leave voluntarily. People working to help vulnerable EU citizens in the UK said the offer of money to return home has contradicted the government's claim that it was doing everything it could to encourage people to register for settled status. The deadline for Europeans living in the UK to apply for the EU settlement scheme is 30th of June. A Home Office spokesperson said some people may choose not to obtain status under the EUSS and may not wish to remain in the UK after the deadline. That is why we have written to stakeholders to inform them that the EEA nationals who wish to leave the UK may be eligible for support to help them do so under the voluntary returns scheme. The news came as research from the Joint Council of the Welfare of Immigrants warned that thousands of European key workers risk losing their legal right to remain in the UK. The report, titled "When the Clapping Stones, EU key workers after Brexit," warns that thousands of European citizens currently fulfilling key worker roles in the care sector, as well as those working in construction, manufacturing and agriculture, are at risk of losing their legal status and face removal from the UK. Of 295 care workers surveyed by the charity, 1 in 7 were unsure what the EUSS was, and 1 in 3 had not heard anything about it before being in touch with the JCWI. And 1 in 3 did not know there was a deadline for settlement scheme, nor when it was. Most of the surveys were conducted between January and March last year. Now, Siobhan, they're saying that the report calls for the immediate lifting of the deadline applying for the granted settlement status. And what do you reckon? Do you think they're going to lift the deadline, or do you think they're going to go ahead with it? And do you think this is creating what the hostile environment that we've already got within the UK?
I mean, the thing with the UK is at this kind of moment we have no idea what they're capable of and no idea what they're going to do. They may, I mean, they've turned around a few times. They may, but it doesn't bode well, does it? I think that this goes back to the Erasmus thing, isn't it? They're beginning to develop such an insular look at our society and the world around us. It really is quite remarkable that against all self-interest, because you know what? We are better, we are richer, we are much more creative for having foreign people, new Scots in our country. Okay, we know that. We know it makes our society much more vibrant, much more interesting. We know that in terms of the economy. We also know that European students are very significant to our economy. So it goes against our interest to start going, push people out, go on, there you go, let's go before you're pushed, because there is an element there, isn't it? We'll pay you a little bit of money before we try and push you out. It's so insular. And to actually begin to run a society and an economy along those type of racial lines, And it goes back again to the kind of the buy-in, the data, the people, and racial profiling. To run a society along those lines is deeply disturbing, I think, because it's not just self-defeating; it's just incredibly racist, actually. After all the promises that the European people were welcome, etc., etc., no one believed it. But here we've got the beginnings, haven't we? We've got the beginnings of an attempt to push gently at this stage, but to push European citizens from their home. And quote, back to where they came from. We are going to be so much worse for that. We are, as a society, as a nation, as a people, we're going to be so much worse for that in a whole host of different ways. Not just the fact that a lot of workers, European workers are working in the care sector. It's the cultural impact that it has on us as well. I mean, the Scottish Government report a few years ago talked about how European citizens tend to have, on average, more kids. So when European citizens come here, they kind of have more kids than people born in Scotland. For a country with a declining population, that's actually really important. So we need European nationals to kind of keep our population at a kind of decent level as well. So there's lots of tangible benefits that we have for European people living here. But do you know what? See, in Scotland, this is their home.
Exactly.
It's New Scots. This is their home. They are now, as far as I'm concerned, they have every right to be here as much as I have when I was born here. That to me, and I think that's how Scotland think now. And again, we're talking about a complete different divergence between Scotland and the UK. I do think that most people in Scotland think that now, is that if it's that if you're here, then you're here. You know what I mean? If you're here, then you're Scottish. And I think that it makes us less Scottish if these people move back.
Yeah.
It's a terrible, terrible situation to be in, but it's yet another nail in the coffin, I think, for the Union, because it goes against everything, I think, that Scotland really wants. It goes against, I think, the common consensus of what a Scotland we want to build.
One of the things that concerned me when I was reading about this
Yeah.
is that people who are not aware of this could easily, if they miss the deadline, these people,
Yeah.
they are their friends, they are part of our communities,
Yes.
could then be classified as criminals and they could be put
Yes. Yes.
in detention centres. To me, that just
Yes.
seems so draconian, so backwards, rather being a progressive. We're meant to be
Yes.
progressing, and it's just so, as you said, it's so against everything that Scotland stands for.
And how dare they?
Yeah,
How dare they criminalise
our
our friends
friends.
and neighbours
Yeah,
like that? There is an element, I think, that there comes a time where maybe, Scotland needs to protect our population in
yeah.
that respect. And really, how dare you? That those our friends and neighbours. They're us. They're us. That's the only word I can. It's the only way I can describe it.
They're our
We are
family.
all Scots. Yes, we
Yes.
are all Scots, regardless of how people came here and came to be here. And to suddenly begin to criminalise these people, there's or potentially, to be
Yeah.
fair, potentially, we don't want to go, but
We don't know
potentially do that.
yet, but
It's
it's
concerning. It is concerning. It's part of the culture, and it's part of that bigger picture, isn't it, of just making people feel a lot less welcome here.
yeah, it's like an us and them culture, and it's not very nice. And I hope it doesn't happen, but I
Yeah.
certainly don't want to see my friends, my family being criminalised because they've overstayed their welcome according to the Home Office, which is just
Do you know,
it's
it's a
crazy.
bit like, do you know what it is? It's a bit like, yeah, of course, you can marry my daughter. Here's £1,000 if you dinner. It's
I
that
know.
kind of, that dual thing where the UK is going, of course, European citizens can say, I'll give you 1,000, you bugger off, It's just bizarre.
It is. It's just I don't get the thinking and the mentality behind it. I really don't.
Yeah.
And I am so glad that here in Scotland we don't think like that. Well, the majority of us don't think like that. We're very
And I
much,
think the consensus is definitely much more welcoming. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. But so hopefully we can organise independence before all this happens. Otherwise, I think no. Right. Now for the next story. UK says it will work with the EU to avoid. UK will be able to work. Minister Jens Svan earlier said he backed proposals to restrict vaccines leaving the EU, saying the Europe should have its fair share. The European Commission later said it had no plans to impose an export ban, explaining proposals would require firms to register vaccine exports. I'm sure that we can work with the EU to ensure that while transparency is welcome, that no blockers are put in place, Hancock said, that the Chatham House think tank. He said that he'd spoken to the chief executives of Pfizer and AstraZeneca, who gave him confidence supplies would not be disrupted, but he still cautioned against any hints of vaccine nationalism. AstraZeneca has a domestic UK supply chain to its vaccine, but the UK supplies of Pfizer vaccine come from the factory in Belgium. The total projected amount of Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine supplied to Britain between January and March is unchanged by a planned upgrade at the production facility. Now, Siobhan, I was kind of reading this and it kind of came as no surprise. It's obviously we've left Europe. Did this surprise you that they're going to have to, not restrict the vaccines, because that's not what they're doing, but obviously when our supply for March, there's going to have to be, the paperwork and things like that for exports and all that kind of stuff coming into play. So, considering that it's coming from the EU, so does that surprise you in any shape or form?
I think it's maybe just the reality, isn't it? That
Yeah.
I know that there's a British exceptionalism that kind of thinks that we shouldn't be subject to the rules even though we've left. But yes, it's not a surprise. I think that the bigger concern is maybe the supply issue, and I hope that because from what I'm hearing is that Pfizer are struggling to kind of keep up with the demands, and it kind of crossed my mind earlier on that there are some national battles. I think you mentioned some like COVID nationalism or something earlier on, and that made me kind of smirk a wee bit. But there are some global issues about the vaccine, and Devi Sridhar talks about that in terms of the richer nations beginning to collect the vaccines and leaving the poorer nations kind of with a lot less, which in terms of a global pandemic doesn't do any of us any good. But there's power struggles there, isn't there, in that bid for the vaccine? And that kind of concerns me slightly. But yeah, go figure, we've got to negotiate a separate deal, and we wouldn't have to work with Europe in terms of getting the vaccine if we were part of it. We could have been part of that kind of whole we would have been much more involved in that whole process. But I think the wider global issues concern me, especially as maybe there's a hint there that the production is not going as smooth as what perhaps we'd hoped and anticipated, and that could potentially, I think, cause a few issues there.
Yeah. Right, now to move on to the next story. Call for the UK government to provide clarity on further COVID measures now. The SNP have blasted the Tories as completely out of touch with reality for expecting people to wait until the March budget, the month when many support schemes come to an end, to learn of further COVID support-19 measures. The SNP Shadow Chancellor Alison Thruess MP has criticised Rishi Sunak for refusing to provide clarity on a series of demands, including maintaining universal credit uplift, extending it to legacy benefits, which will leave people in the dark regarding their incomes until the very last minute. The Chancellor has said it is reasonable to consider suggestions in around at the budget, which is scheduled for March the 3rd. Now, Siobhan, do we think the Tories are out of touch? Or do you think it is very reasonable that we all wait?
out of touch only in the sense that they're living on the freaking moon. You know, honest to God. I mean, do you know what have we got through this programme so far? Haven't we? We've got the illegal, the illegal purchase of data on
Oh, yeah.
ethnic minorities. We've got the please stay, but please bugger off to the European nationals. We've got this complete deep uncertainty to our most
Yeah.
vulnerable within
Yeah.
society, to our most vulnerable, because this is things like universal
Exactly.
credit that they're playing around with, the 20 quid uplift, etc., etc. I've said this all along, that see if Scotland was independent, it would be a lot less stressful for us. COVID would have been a lot less stressful. And the reason for that is that we would have planned these things much better. Germany and France? Germany, what they did at the start, right, furlough to me, that was at the start. Furlough to me, folk, that's it, them will review at that point. Then people knew where they were going to stand in terms of their money and in terms of their income and in terms of their jobs as well. Okay, what we had constantly with the UK is, we're winning, yeah, we're going to extend it, no, we're no, da 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 da. And here we have exactly the same thing again, causing much more stress and anxiety for people. 20 quid is the universal credit uplift, if I'm
Yeah.
correct in that. That's a lot of money when you're skint. That is a lot of money when you're skint, and it's a lot of money to lose. So what you've got is a situation is like people don't know whether they're going to keep that or not. People don't know whether they're going to get that taken off them or not. That, can you imagine the stress of that? Can you imagine the stress of that, not knowing that level, or not having that degree of certainty? That is where a kind of another Scotland would be very, very different, isn't it? We would never have done this. We would never have done this. But the UK has just made things so much more difficult for us in terms of our finances. This COVID could have been easier. It could have been easier. It could have been easier in terms of infection rates, and it could have been easier in terms of some economic security. But that's not been the case, and it's just made it 100 times worse. It's disgraceful and it's shocking, absolutely shocking. And again, people will be looking at that going, that's not what we want anymore.
Yeah. It's, what can you say? It's the UK government, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 Right, to move on to the next story. Again, UK government. MP calls Priti Patel's position over coronavirus border chaos into question. The SNP's Justice and Home Affairs spokesperson has called into question the Home Secretary's position and pressed for clear and urgent answers over the Tory government's border chaos to tackle the coronavirus pandemic. In the House of Commons, Joanna Cherry QC MP challenged Priti Patel to set out who overruled her view that the UK should have closed its borders earlier in the pandemic. And why did she not speak out or resign, given the risk of increased transmission from people entering the country? Commenting, the SNP's Justice and Home Affairs spokesperson, Joanna Cherry QC MP, said it's simply not accurate to say that there has been a comprehensive strategy in place since January 2020. It's extraordinary that a UK government and a Home Secretary so obsessed with stopping people from entering the country and deporting those already here should have taken so long to properly address the COVID-19 protections at the UK border. Right, Siobhan, what can we say? The UK government, once again, contradicting what they do and what they say. And I was watching this today, and with Priti Patel, and when she was trying to claim that they had a strategy in place since January 2020, it was just beggar's belief. So what do you think of Joanna Cherry's comment today to Priti Patel?
I mean, I think that, it had to be said, didn't it? Good for
Yeah, it did.
Joanna for saying it, really. Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe they have had a strategy, but it's a strategy of chaos. So, we're an island, I mean, again, that's pretty obvious to everybody, but as an island, we could have controlled the pandemic much, much, much more. carefully. Country like Germany, with so many other countries on, on the borders, is more difficult to manage actually in terms of a kind of global and highly transmissible infection. But look at New Zealand. I mean, New Zealand have managed it remarkably well because they immediately and decisively set up very, very strict guidelines, closed the borders, and basically, had very, very strict rules for people coming in. What's the kind of the hotels now that they're thinking on being setting up? Well, it's a year too late.
Yeah.
We could have managed this so much better had we done what was suggested back in kind of January, February, March to control the borders coming in. Who was it that was saying? I was watching something today, and we got down to something like kind of under 1% infection in June and July, and then the holiday season started, and then all the kind of the travel started back and forth, and then it suddenly escalated out of control. Do you remember when Devi Sridhar told us?
Yeah.
Professor Sridhar told us back in June, holiday at your peril.
Yep.
And this is the cost of it. I think that we could have been a lot stronger, and I think the Scottish Government could have been a lot stronger on that as well, if I'm honest. But the fact is, borders are reserved to Westminster. We could have done more in Scotland, but there was a limit to what we could have done. Devi Sridhar, I think, compared it to being a single carriage on a speeding train. Scotland's relationship to the UK in terms of COVID, there's a little bit we can do, but if it's the train still speeding, it's still speeding, So we could have controlled it so much better. What gets me about Westminster is the fact that they look like they're only beginning to learn these things now. And we know, of course, from this discussion today with Joanna Cherry and Preet Patel, that they were discussing that, but dismissed it. So it's not like it was incompetent going, they dismissed that. We would be in a very, very different position now if that had happened. We would have been in a very, very different position now.
Definitely. Right, we'll move on to the next story. Support for students in hardship. Students experiencing hardship as a result of coronavirus COVID-19 will be supported by £20 million of Scottish Government funding. A further £10 million has been allocated to universities and colleges for income lost and providing rent rebates. To complement the additional £30 million, the Scottish Funding Council is also repurposing £5 million of student support funding towards discretionary funding for further education students in the college sector. Now, Siobhan, this is a good news story. I was reading this and I was like, wow, it's not a lot of money, but it's a lot more than what the UK government is providing and doing. And if that's what we can do with one arm tied behind our backs, imagine what we could be doing if we were independent.
I think it comes down to that kind of, what I was saying earlier on, isn't it? It's that, things could have been a lot less stressful in those issues if we'd not been tied to the UK during the COVID pandemic. Students wouldn't have to worry. I work at a university. Students are very worried about how they're going to pay the rent for a flat that they can't really move back into, loss in their jobs, etc., etc. These are real issues, and they're becoming increasingly common across the student population. So I must admit, I kind of, when I saw the news, I did think of the kind of half a dozen students I've had conversations with about this, you know what I mean? Because it will genuinely have a significant impact on their lives, because there's money worries there. So it is a good news story, and it's a taste of what we can do. And it's just, yes, it's not masses of money, and when you share it out amongst the students, it's probably not going to be a huge amount, but it's better than nothing. But it's a taster of, I think, where the priorities lie for Scotland, and it usually lies with trying to offset the poverty of our citizens and the students, I think, being particularly in hardship at these times as well.
Yeah, because the thing is with students, their incomes have been hot, because normally they would be working in the hospitality sector and all these sectors that are shut down. And I know when I was a student, that's what I did to supplement my income. So even though it's not a lot of money, it's still something to help them out.
It is. It's better than nothing, actually. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, for sure it is. It's and you know, the kind of there's the discretionary fund as well. There's a lot of
Hmm.
students applying for that. It's quite hard. There's also a lot of kind of, you know, I mean, there's been a lot of students, of course, and there has been some funding for this. A lot of students having to work without computing equipment and stuff as well. You know, normally, you know, you think that everybody has a computer, but not quite the computer that you would need, you know, to kind of to do your online exams, etc., etc. So, you know, there's some students working with phones and stuff in the same way that school kids are. So it's just wee things like that that the online learning has kind of created a whole new level of financial issues as well for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's going to help out some students. Now, for the last story of the evening, leading experts are to join Edinburgh University Global COVID-19 discussion. Some of the world's most respected public health figures, including Dr. Anthony Fauci and Nashan Chong, are to join a series of University of Edinburgh debates analysing the future complications of COVID-19. Dr. Fauci, leading infectious disease expert and chief medical advisor to the Biden administration, and China's top respiratory diseases expert, Dr. Chong, will take part in the first Edinburgh Futures Conversations event. The opening session which focuses on public health, will be chaired by former Botswanian Minister of Health, Professor Sheila Tu, and co-chair of the Nursing Now Global campaign. The Chair of Global Public Health at the University of Edinburgh, Professor David Sherdare, and Baillie Gifford, Chair of Ethics and Data and Artificial Intelligence, Shannon Valor, will also join the event to share their perspectives of the pandemic and how to reshape the public health systems. Participants will examine the role that universities and students can play in nurturing a multi-sector, multi-level approach to the collective action. The free online event will take place on Thursday, the 2nd of March. Now, Siobhan, again, this is just fantastic. It's going to be basically Edinburgh University is hosting this. And again, it's about looking into the future of how COVID is going to affect us.
Yeah.
Again, it shows a forward thinking of us here in Scotland, but and our academics and professors and all the wonderful people that we have. So now it's a free online event, so I imagine the public are going to be able to participate or be able to watch at least on this event.
Yeah, I've
This
signed
is
up for it
really,
already.
yeah. I was going to ask, have you signed up?
I'm so excited. I signed up just before I come on here. Yeah, I mean it's great, isn't it? And I think that, I mean, Edinburgh University have got. I mean, Scotland's been lucky in terms of the expertise that we've got during COVID. I mean, Devi Shreda, Professor Pauline Bald as well, who's been amazing. Linda
Yeah,
Bald, sorry, I do apologise, Professor Linda Bald. She's been amazing as well. They've both been real sources of knowledge and expertise that we've tapped into. So it's great to bring that international expertise. Professor Fauci, I think is how you pronounce
yeah.
him. He's the guy that Donald Trump sidelined. I was reading an interview with him just this morning, actually, because obviously he's sentinel to. So, yep, he's sentinel to Biden's new COVID approach and the science based. And this is what it is again, isn't it? In a world where we've had Donald Trump pushing
Mm-hmm.
non-science, and also as well, where if we think back to the UK approach at the start with the kind of, herd immunity, this complete nonsense, non-scientific based nonsense. This is a shift again where Scotland's playing a role in the return to science. Do you remember when Biden, one of his first speeches that he said, and he hadn't even won yet, but he said basically, he actually gave a speech about talking about the return to truth and the return to science and
Yeah,
fact. And I think that Edinburgh University, there's kind of an element here that COVID has allowed us to see the importance of that
yeah,
and to see the damage that science, that ignoring science has made that's had on America and on England, especially, and in the UK generally
yeah.
as well. So there is a kind of, it's an exciting time, I think, and to look to, like you say, look to the future of that and look at how we build a a post-COVID global society.
Yeah.
And the fact that it is so global I think is a great thing. One of the things, I'm a big fan of Devi Sridhar, as you probably guessed, but one of the things that she talks about in terms of a public health approach is basically the first thing you do is protect your most vulnerable.
Yes.
And for me, that's a template of a well-being society as well. And, it's interesting that I think they both actually, in moral terms and practical terms, they align together. And I think if we can look globally at building that protect your vulnerable first, then we can build a really good future there. But it's exciting, and it's exciting that Scotland's part of that for sure.
Oh, definitely. And yeah, with Professor Devi Sridhar, I think she's absolutely amazing, and I always follow her advice because it's so sensible,
Absolutely.
clear, and concise.
Yeah.
And same with Professor Linda Bold as well. It's very
Yeah.
clear,
Yeah.
concise, easy to understand. They don't try to jazz it up or anything. They use everyday language to explain. And, if we had been, well, if the UK government had been following the science from day one, we would be
Yeah.
back to more normality right
Yeah,
now,
we would.
which is
Yeah, we would.
quite
I don't think there's
scary.
any doubt there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But this is going to be I'm going to sign up for it as well. I just never get a chance before the show, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely. But that's all we have time for. And thank you very much to Siobhan for joining me tonight on tonight's show. She has been absolutely excellent, and I can't wait to have a blather with her later on and carry on some of the discussion. But in the meantime, so thank you very much, Siobhan, for joining me tonight. It has been an absolute pleasure. And also as well, this is the part of the show where we say we really need your support. We are run by volunteers, and we are always looking for help. Volunteers, people to help us out in the studio, behind the scenes, or to sit in the hot seat as well. And even if you just fancy just kind of dipping your toes in a wee bit of journalism, give us a shout. The other thing is please, we are looking for people to basically help us financially as well. All we ask for is £5 a month donation to help us out, and there's the details along here, and you can register as a supporter for Broadcasting Scotland. If you cannot afford, because we understand times are really difficult right now, just sharing the programme, spreading the word out there, fantastic, that is wonderful, please do it. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us here at Scotland is 7, Broadcasting Scotland, and we hope you have a lovely evening. Thank you.